Hey everybody, it's Pete Bartolozzi again, and we're continuing with Daniel and Revelation. We're still in Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 8, the two visions that are in each of those and how they compare to each other. There's so much information in this, is the reason why we're going to be we're in these chapters for such a long time. And we were in chapter 7 where we ended up last time. And last time I was running really short of time because my phone will cut off at like 33 minutes. I wasn't watching the time, so it ended kind of abruptly. But we were at verse 25 in chapter 7, and it's the only part of the vision of chapter 7 where Daniel received some understanding about the final beast, the fourth beast, but it was because he specifically asked about it. And so he got some interpretation. There's interpretation concerning them all in in the vision of chapter 8, as we've seen. But this particular one, we're in the middle of that particular one. We've been we're talking about the 10 horns that were on its head of that final beast. And he said, and the one that came up, which was that little horn that came up out of the 10, causing 3 of the horns to fall before it. The horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and whose appearance was more stout than his fellows. And that's where we left off, talking about his appearance more stout than his fellows, and how he would be of great, imposing, intimidating character. At least in his physical, it describes his physical attributes. And that's why Dr. Sutton said he was a bodybuilder, so he was maybe a strong physique. This word also can imply in the Hebrew of somebody of stature, of height. So somebody who's tall and of a bodybuilding strength. Somebody that if they came in just their very physical presence alone, there can seem a little intimidating as they tower over you and show such bodily strength. And he would be somebody like this. And and we pretty much finished that verse, and we were ready for verse 21. I said 25, didn't I? we read verse 20 last time. We're ready for verse 21 now. And it says, after all this about the Antichrist, and it says, and I watched as this horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Now, you got to understand that saints in the Old Testament referred to the Jews. And these visions given to Daniel are primarily about Israel and about the Jews. Even though when we get to the tribulation period, it will be a post-Messianic time, so there'll be plenty of people out of the nations, or as we more commonly say, out of the Gentiles, who will get saved and accept the Lord. But this is primarily, we'll see, even later, God says, I'm going to show you what will befall your people, and specifically his people. Daniel's people would be Israel. These prophecies are primarily about Israel and God's dealings with Israel. And so they were called the saints. So Paul in the New Testament talks about how we've been counted among the saints, or part of the saints. Well, let's talk about the Jews. We're grafted in, if you would, and into that covenant that God had with Abraham, and into the Messiah, so that all the nations, all of us, can come out of all the different nations as God established, and be counted among the saints, to have common as covenant with God, to have that in common now in Christ Jesus. So here it's primarily referring to Israel, even though there will be people of the nations who are Christians who will be killed during that time, who come to know me, because there's great evangelism going on during the tribulation period too, folks, and we'll see some more of that as we go on. But you got the 144,000 Jews who are evangelists. What are they doing? Well, they're out there preaching the gospel. They're out there, getting people to accept God and to reject the Messiah and not to take the mark of the beast and so on, warning them about that side, but getting them to accept God and choose Him. So what's the use of evangelizing if nobody can get saved, or if nobody's going to get saved? There's going to be a lot of people getting saved during that time. Then you got the two witnesses, and you can be assured of the plethora of people that are going to accept the Lord, who are not a part of the 144,000, or not the two witnesses. All those people are going to still preach the gospel themselves as well. So there's going to be a great proclamation of the gospel during the time of the tribulation period. And they'll be included in the saints, of course. But the focus of these prophecies has to do with Israel, and those who had this natural covenant through Abraham's lineage, and his dealings with them. And so, as he makes war with the saints and prevailed against them, because we know at mid-trib, for him to get the temple, to get the rock that God says is his, and to go in and declare himself to be God, then he's going to take Israel. So he's going to war against them. There's going to be a lot who die, and there's going to be those here who who um, that he prevails against them, those will be those who will die for what they do. And so this is talking primarily about the Jews. A lot of Jews will die in defending themselves and so on. So verse 22 in chapter 7, it says, see, he's going to do this. He's going to prevail against the saints. He's going to take Israel, these things. And it says, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given in favor of the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Note this. We shouldn't be afraid about, talking about the Antichrist and so on, or be afraid of him, because every time the Antichrist is mentioned, it goes on to mention God's judgment against him, as it does here. And then verse 23, it says, and he said, and the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the kingdoms and will devour the whole land. And it shall tread it down and break it into pieces. Now here, even though it can be translated whole earth, I believe it's talking about the whole land. It's talking about the land of Israel, because that's what he's going to trample underfoot. That's what he's going to break into pieces. And that doesn't mean like break up the dirt in the ground. It means to actually divide the land and sell it for a price to others, as we will see other scriptural evidences of this as we go along. Now, so let's go into verse 24. Of chapter 7, it says, and the 10 horns that will rise out of this kingdom are 10 rulers. Then after these 10 will arise another ruler. He will be different from the former rulers, and he will subdue 3 of them. As we saw, this is the interpretation now. As we saw in the first part of chapter 7, it says that the little horn will come up among the 10, and it will uproot 3 of those horns. Here it is saying that he will have to uproot 3 of those leaders. He will have to subdue them because they will turn against him. So you're going to see, we're already beginning to see evidence that even when the Antichrist comes into power, it isn't that he has full power and he's never challenged. He actually is challenged. 3 of those leaders of 3 of the regions of this empire that is brought together, that we're seeing take place in the European Union, when it finally comes together as one nation, 3 of those leaders are going to oppose him, and he has to uproot them. He has to put them down, and it implies that he has to. He has to put them down because they rise up against him. So he doesn't have perfect control. He has problems within his own kingdom, right away from the get-go of all this. And then verse 25 says, and he will speak great words against the Most High. And we've already seen this where it says he's a great orator, as we'll see, but he also, here it says the Hebrew implies that he will formulate speeches against the Most High. It will, people who preach what is wrong, as we can see it in our day, they put wording of things together that makes it sound they're right, but it's so perverted. The basis on which they're coming from it really has no basis at all. And what they're trying to create and their whole perspective is bogus. But if nobody challenged the perspective and the lies, then it's how they present it and how they word it sounds so deceiving, and why so many people can fall prey to it. But in this case, he will specifically formulate these against the Most High. So he's got to turn people against God, for one, because he is against him, and he wants to present himself as God, and he has to turn them against the God to try to do that. And it says, and he will exhaust the saints of the Most High. Again, even though there are going to be a lot of people of the nations who will get saved during the tribulation, and he will no doubt exhaust them, but this is primarily speaking of Israel. He will exhaust Israel. And it says, and he intends to alter, that is to change, the appointed times and the decree. This is the commission that Satan gives his Antichrist, because this is Satan's intent himself. This word I translate intends is the word sabar. It is a word that means to think. The Strong's says that it means to bear in mind. That is to hope. All right. That's why I translate it intends. He intends to. Okay. What we're about to talk about here is not what he can do or will do. It is simply revealing what he intends to do, and that is all it is. Because what he intends to, he will not be successful in. God's already won, as far as I'm concerned. He knows the future. It's already settled issue with him. We're just beginning to live it out in our time. Of course, we're not in the tribulation period, but it's about to play out. We're seeing the beginnings of all the things that need to be established before that tribulation period begins, before the pre-tribulation rapture of the glorious church. And So it's what he hopes to. It's what he intends to. And it says he intends to change the appointed times. Now, the word appointed times here that I translate this is actually the word zaman in the Hebrew. And it is a word that is defined in my Brown Driver Briggs commentary, not just commentary, but their lexicon. And they define this word as age. It means time, but it means an age, like an age of time. And the Thayers, it comes from a Hebrew word that means, the Thayers defines as appointed time, that Strong's defines as an appointed occasion. Now I'm going to look at the Greek here, and look at the Septuagint and how they translated the Hebrew into the Septuagint, and they translated this word appointed times with the word kairos in the Greek. Now kairos means a fitting season, an opportunity, occasion of time. Kairos is time as opportune, or opportune time. It's derived from kara, meaning head, referring to things coming to a head. Okay, this word kairos can refer to the climax of time. Kairos means a suitable time, the right moment, a favorable moment. The Vine's Expository Dictionary, he compares the two primary Greek words for time as we see them in the New Testament. Of course, we have kairos, and then he also compares it with chronos, which is a Greek word from which we get our English word chronology. And he said chronos expresses the duration of a period, okay, or of an age, okay, the period of time. Therefore, chronology really refers to lengths of time. And kairos stresses it as marked by certain features. Like I said, the climax of time, the things that you describe in periods of time that shows the turning point of something in that period of time, and what made that time acknowledged for what it is. It's kind of like, if I were to say the decade of the 50s, well, that's a period of time. Chronos would be like a decade there in that case. And you think of the 50s, what do you think of? You think of, sock hops and, the birth of rock and roll and Elvis Presley and things. See, that there's certain epics of things that defined that period. That would be the chronos of that time, those epics that define the time. And then that was kairos, and then chronos is just that period of time, that 10-year decade of the 50s, and so on. Every decade has some sort of description about it, and the epics that defined what that era was like. And we're looking at kairos here. And so he wants to change the appointed time. God has an appointed time at the end. He has an epic when the Lord Jesus Christ comes with all his saints, and the devil's going to be defeated, the Antichrist destroyed, and all his armies, and all of this kind of stuff, and every eye will see him, and so on. There's an epic of things. There's of all of this, and the devil intends to alter or to change that appointed time. Well, I think you all know that he can't do it, but this is simply what he intends, is what he wants to do, you see. And so anyway, to change the appointed times and the decree. Now, the word decree is the Hebrew word doth, and it is a word that in reference to law or decree, and is used of the idea of what is unchangeable and thus permanent. God has created the end of the age of Adam's lease, which is where Satan gets his legal right to remain here, and why he still operates in the earth, even though Jesus defeated him. He still has that lease of authority given to him, given to Adam by God. And if God gave this lease of time to Adam, then he gave it to it by the establishment of his word. It is the age of Adam's dominion, because when he created him, he said, have dominion of the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, everything that creeps upon the earth. God delegated to him his sovereign authority over the earth, you see. And so Adam had that. But when Adam yielded to the devil, he yielded to his authority and therefore gave up that over to Adam. Now, Adam didn't have a moral right to do that, but he did have a legal right. So the devil doesn't have a moral right to operate here, but he does have a legal right because of that lease given to him. So how long is that lease of time? Well, I'm going to bring out something here in Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10. It says, declaring the end from the beginning. And of course, the verse before was speaking of what God does. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel will stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So God, as plain as day, God declared the end from the beginning. Now, the only way you can do that is if you know the end before everything began. So God declared the end from the beginning. All right. And then, of course, we know in Second Peter chapter 3 and verse 8, it says, "But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day." And that's pulled from Psalm 90, verse 4, where with God, 1,000 years is a day is 1,000 years. Okay. Now you put those two together, and this is something that the Jews also understand in looking at Scripture, and it said that God told the end from the beginning, and that a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And in understanding these things, I drew this out on here, and each section here that I separated with these red lines represents the day. In the beginning of Genesis chapter 1, that's the beginning, and God created what? There was 7 days established by God. 6 days of creation, 7 days total, with that seventh day of rest. Now, 7 days. I'm just looking trying to remember where I put my markers. 7 days God created, and a day with the Lord is 1,000 years. 1,000 years is a day, and God told the end from the beginning. He revealed from the very beginning the period of time. In fact, I want to read something really quick to you. I don't have it right here in front of me here, but I do have it in my Revelation outline. I'm going to go ahead and read it here. And Dr. Billy Brim, when she was flying back from Australia, and as she was flying back from Australia, she made the comment, or she was coming across the international date line. She said that the pilot came on and made the statement about passing the international date line, telling, "Hey, we just now passed the international date line." And I was looking for that quote, and I'm not offhand seeing it because I thought it was right in the beginning of my notes in all of this. But what I wanted to bring out is that he said to her, the Spirit of God spoke to her when she heard the pilot say, "We're crossing the international date line." And the Spirit of God said to her, if I can remember this correctly, he said, God invented time. Precisely. Mathematically, I know I'm not getting this right now already. There's 3 of them. Well, I'm not thinking. But God invented time. He invented it precisely. He presented it mathematically. There was a third one in there. And he said, God measured out a piece of eternity and called it time for his dealings with man. Each passing second counts off time till the end of time and its usefulness to God. But God measured out a piece of eternity and called it time for his dealings with man. You see, God is precise in what he does. God, you'll find the Bible's mathematically perfect. And sometimes maybe I'll have the opportunity to talk about that. But God put his signature on his word in so many dimensions. So God measured out. And so in the beginning, he revealed the end. And he revealed with the day of the Lord is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. He revealed with 7 days, he revealed 7,000 years of time. Now, Adam was given a 6-day work week. And they understand that if you take these first 6 days, the 6-day work week is the 6 days of authority leased to Adam by God over the earth. So we can call this 6,000. So these 6 days represent 6,000 years. That is the length of the age of Adam's lease. And folks, we're coming to the end of those 6,000 years. And all the more reason why it's so important to begin to understand even more end time prophecy. You see, not to set aside the rest of the Bible. All the rest of the Bible is equally as important, but too many people have set aside end time prophecy as though it's not equally important, and it most certainly is. You see, with all the other subjects of faith and love, putting on the armor of God, and so on. And they develop reasons in their mind to try to shove it off to the side as though it's not important to know. It is important to know. So 6,000 years. And he said that his lease runs out. When his lease runs, see, he gave that to the devil. So when that lease runs out, the devil loses that lease. He loses his legal right because it ends, you see. And if God gave it to Adam by the empowerment of his word, he cannot break that lease. Some people say, well, I thought God can do anything. Well, the Bible says God cannot lie. So no, God can't do anything. Now, as far as his ability and power, yes, he can. All right. But God cannot break his word. You see, if somebody gives you the word and they break it, what are they? A liar. And we know God's not a liar. So he can't. That's the reason the devil's still here. He still has the legal right of that lease. And God can't break it because he would break his word. And God cannot lie, you see. But the end of that lease is coming up. And the devil's going to lose it, and he's trying to change that. How can he change it? Well, see, if he can destroy Israel, and I think I've mentioned this before, then he can stop the prophecies concerning Israel, as we're reading here, from coming to pass. That's why he tries to annihilate the Jews. But see, he can't do it. God does protect. Yeah, he may have killed he's killed millions and millions, not just under Hitler, but millions and millions throughout the century. There was so many killed during the Babylonians came in. There was so many killed, when the Romans, took Jerusalem and dispersed them. There's so many murdered throughout the years, but the devil has never been able to annihilate them. They are still prolific in the earth and populating this entire earth. And so when they were spread out, the devil couldn't get them all. He had to get them all in one place to kill them. And in him dispersing them actually hurt his own efforts of trying to do so. But, hey, if anybody's a fool, the devil is. All right. So there's this 6,000 years of Adam's lease. And so the Bible, and in the seventh year, the seventh day, the seventh year, the day of rest, that's the millennial reign. The last 1,000 years is that millennial reign, where Christ will rule in the earth, and those who were overcomers during this time will be ruling and reigning with him during that time. Okay, my time's starting to go. I need to get this done. I said all that. And then the next phrase in verse 25 of chapter 7, we're still there. And it says, it shall be given into his hand. All right. Now, for a time and half a times, he comes, takes Israel, he takes the temple, all that kind of stuff. He divides the land and troddens it under and does all this stuff. And it says it's given into his hand for a time and half a time. There are so many Christians who are trying to say, well, God gives it into his hand. He couldn't have it unless God gives it to him. That is a lie. Because of the lease that Satan got from Adam, Satan gives him that lease. This Antichrist is a wicked man, and God is not going to delegate any authority to him by any means. It'd be a kingdom divided against itself and could not stand, according to Jesus' own words, if he were to do such a thing. This is such foolish thinking. It is the devil who gives him his commission, the devil who puts him up into power. How can anybody ever say that God gives it to him? He does not. All right, it's given into his hand for a time and half a time. Now, what does that phrase mean? The time and half. Now, if you look earlier on in Daniel, when Daniel, the Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. This was his second dream, not the dream of the statue, but the second dream. And God told him about how, for time's sake, told him how he would become like the wild beast of the field. And he said, until 7 times pass over you. And what does the word 7 times mean? It literally means 7 years. You see this phrase from, is the Hebrew, probably even Chaldean. It is a word used by the Chaldeans in reference to a period of time that we call a year, okay? And of the rotation of the earth around the sun, 1 year. And that's they use this word time. Now, here it says times, a time, times, and half a time. Now, the word time is the first word, and it's singular. So that means 1 year. And then it says times plural. When it says times plural, how do you know how many times or how many years? It's real simple. You see, if it has times plural without a qualifying number, it simply means 2. See, where with Nebuchadnezzar, it said till 7 times pass over. So if anything past 2, then it needs a qualifying number to describe the plural. If there's no qualifying number, it just simply means 2. So you got time, 1 year, times 2 years, and half a time. And of course, then half a time would be half a year. And here we have a phrase called meaning 3.5 years. So this reveals that the Antichrist doesn't come to Jerusalem, doesn't tread under the land, doesn't divide the land, doesn't take the temple, doesn't do all that until mid-trib. Not the whole 7 years, okay? He comes in at mid-trib, takes Israel, and takes the temple, and does all these things he's doing, and is given to him by Satan for a time, times, and half a time. Now, this is Chaldean phraseology back then, but because of the time that they were in that era, this was incorporated into end-time biblical prophecy in reference specifically to the latter half of the tribulation, not the entire tribulation, as we call it. That's where. So know this phrase. It's incorporated now. The 3.5 years is end time biblical prophecy in reference to the latter half of the tribulation, not the first half, the latter half. All right. Um, Now, God reveals and does tell us that these 10 leaders would rise, and over these 10 regions of the European, or they call it the European Union now. It's probably going to be called something else when they become an entire nation, when they finally sign the Constitution and cease to be individual nations. And it isn't God who gives it to him again. It is Satan who gives it to him. Billy Brims, in her notes, stated that this time the EU has been entirely a product of treaties. The founding treaty was the Treaty of Rome, signed in 1957. It is amazing to research some of the founding statements and the reference to the Roman Empire when it came to the foundings of this European Union. Um, uh, Revelation 13:2 clearly tells us that this power isn't given by God, but by Satan. And it says, and the beast which I saw that was like unto a leopard, and his feet like unto his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth is the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, which we see later in Revelation, is clearly said to be Satan in chapter 12. And the dragon gave him his power. It wasn't God who gives it to him, it is Satan. The dragon, Satan, gives this Antichrist his power, his seat, and great authority for the time and half a time. Now, this corresponds to the vision in chapter 8, and this corresponds with the interpretation, the latter half of chapter 8, which begins in chapter 8, verse 23, concerning this fourth beast. Okay, that's not where it began as far as the interpretation, but where it begins about this fourth beast. And now that I'm seeing we're coming up on 27 minutes, then my time's pretty much done for this broadcast. So I trust that I'm trusting this is still very clear, and this is helping you to understand and see how easy the book of Daniel is to understand. And then when you ask Jesus, you claim what Jesus spoke over you, of that he who reads Daniel, let him understand. I receive that. I understand. I receive what Jesus spoke. It's mine in Jesus' name. So anyway, I just want to thank you once again for listening to this broadcast, and be blessed.